Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 348 for July 25th, 2024. Hey everyone, Deanna Rubino here back with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. It was actually very exciting if you're watching it live because just complete failure. We blame it on Intel's technology, which Zach switched back to for some reason. Anyway, we are back. We're going to be talking about the CrowdStrike situation that happened over the weekend, as well as Bing generative search, version 24H2 of Windows 11, when it's coming out, impressions and review, as well as some new Windows 11 features that are coming soon. And we'll do a deeper dive on those new Copilot Plus PCs, aka the Qualcomm Snapdragon X laptops, of which I have quite a few of. And hopefully you all saw my Surface Pro 11 review, which was my longest review to date. Went up about 10 days ago, I believe. So actually, it was almost 2 weeks ago now I think about it. Anyway, Zach, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm doing a lot better now. Things are working. I was stressing out about 30 seconds ago, but we're all good. We're all good.
Well, let's just get into it. So let's start with CrowdStrike. So
Yes.
um, this was this goes to show you sort of the disconnect that can be exhibited in today's modern society. Uh, like many of you, I woke up on Friday to the headlines about airlines being down and banks not working and all sorts of modern technology that relies on computers, specifically computers running Windows, uh, all were failing. And it was weird because I didn't exhibit a single thing, but it's because I work from home. And I went to the gym that night and went to the supermarket and everything seemed fine to me. And no one was running down my street, screaming the end of the world. But if you went online, it looked like the end of the world, especially if you're at an airport, which of course there were real world ramifications, or if you were at a hospital too. So, Zach, do you know some of the details here? I know there's been some explainers on exactly what happened here.
Yeah.
Uh, it was unfortunate because while Microsoft was the delivery system for this major bug, they were not directly the cause of it. That said, at least initial reporting made it look like it was
Yeah.
Microsoft's fault, and I think their stock kind of took a hit for a little
Yeah.
while.
Microsoft isn't happy that the world blamed them for this issue because it technically wasn't their fault. Windows did as it was designed to, which is kernel panic if an unknown driver or a faulty driver is loaded at boot. So what happened was an actual a security firm, a cyber security firm called CrowdStrike. They have many customers in the Fortune 500. Lots of industrial or service based companies such as airlines and retail spaces use this company's software to protect their Windows machines from potential attack. They pushed out what they were calling, I think, a configuration update on Thursday night, Friday morning, I guess, which was faulty. They didn't notice it was faulty. They, I assume, thought it was fine. They pushed it out, and Windows PCs installed them, restarted to apply those updates, and once they tried to boot back up, began failing. And so this is why, if you were a user who uses Windows at home, you probably didn't see this because you're likely not using CrowdStrike software. This is very enterprisey, very cybersecurity focused software that you only really need to worry about if you're an enterprise or a business that runs a service that has to use Windows machines as an endpoint. And so personal devices were unaffected by this because it wasn't a Windows issue, it was a CrowdStrike issue. And if you were using a laptop that did have CrowdStrike software on it that was was unfortunate enough to install this update automatically and Windows rebooted, then you would find yourself in a boot loop thanks to a BSOD, which would then take you to a Windows recovery screen. Now, most people aren't tech heads. They don't really know how to get themselves out of that scenario where Windows won't boot and keeps boot looping into a recovery screen. And so a lot of PCs were stuck. And the biggest issue with this was that once the PC hit this issue and was constantly rebooting, it was offline. And so there's no easy fix for those PCs that are already affected. If you have, say, if you're a company who has hundreds of thousands of servers in a data center somewhere and they're all boot looping now, you can't just hit restart remotely and fix them all. They are stuck. You now need to go there physically as an IT admin or whoever you may be in the company who handles that to manually restart those PCs and recover them back to a working state. And that's a bit of a problem for a lot of companies where they have, machines remotely, like in a server in another state or another country even, like handles customer data or whatever it may be, infrastructure. You now have to rely on somebody in that country or in that state to do that for you. And so it's been a bit of an issue this last week for certain companies who haven't been able to immediately recover from this. A lot of companies were able to immediately recover with little to no issue. Quite a bit of downtime maybe for the first few hours of the day, but for a lot of people, it was mostly recovered by the end of Friday. But there are some companies who are still having issues. I think I was reading Delta is still having issues at this very moment because they've got systems everywhere and they don't have enough IT people to go out and manually fix those machines. And so Microsoft was pretty upset at this because the media, and this is one of those rare times where mainstream media catches onto a technology story and begins covering it. So this was on, in the UK at least, it was on BBC News, on TV and stuff. I never see Microsoft and Windows mentioned on BBC News pretty much ever. It's never really a thing. This was breaking news across all the major sort of news broadcasters. Sky News here in the UK actually was knocked offline because of it. I don't know how or why that happened, but they were knocked offline briefly, and when they came back, they were running a very basic stream of their news studio. It affected a lot of people, and immediately, because Windows was blue screening, it looked like a Windows problem. Most people weren't able to determine straight away what the cause was, and it was only when sort of people, technical people, started looking into it, going, "Oh, this is a driver from CrowdStrike that's causing this issue." Then it became clear that actually it's not Microsoft's fault. Microsoft didn't push out a faulty update. This isn't their doing. This is companies using CrowdStrike on Windows machines, which apparently is on millions and millions of Windows machines. I think Microsoft reported the CrowdStrike bug caused 8.5 million Windows machines to sort of be knocked offline. And that was across the globe. So it started in Australia, obviously, as they were waking up on Friday. They were waking up to some issues, and that sort of spread across Europe and then eventually to the States and the Western side of the world. And like I said, really, by Friday mid-morning, it was kind of clear what had happened. Like, CrowdStrike had identified the issue. They'd pulled the driver. They'd even released a fix. Here's how you fix it. You have to go into safe mode, manually remove this driver, and then Windows should boot just fine. And then there was another thing going around where apparently if you just kept rebooting Windows manually, keep rebooting it, Windows would eventually just boot fine. And so that works for some people, I think. But I think for the majority of PCs that were taken offline, you have to manually go in and recover through safe mode, and that's really where the problem is, because like I said, lots of these machines are somewhere else, and so you can't just immediately go to it and manually fix it. And so that was a bit of an odd thing to wake up to. Microsoft's Windows has gone down, global news. It was for a moment pretty kind of worrying, because it was a good sort of taster as to what it would be like if, say, there was a cyber attack or cyber terrorism, trying to take down an operating system or some sort of infrastructure running on a platform, and the chaos it would cause. And again, it only affected 8.5 million Windows devices there, which affected,
they're just the important ones.
A lot of the important ones. It wasn't everything. Some banks did go down, like I said, some news stations, some airlines, some retail spaces, but it wasn't everything. Some retail spaces were fine, some news stations were fine, some airlines were fine, so it wasn't everything. But it's a taster of what it could be like if somebody did purposefully try to take down our infrastructure. And so it was an interesting first 3 hours as people were trying to figure out what was wrong. There was a theory that it could be a cyber attack. CrowdStrike was very quick to come out and say, no, this isn't a cyber. We've not been hacked. Please, we're a cybersecurity firm. We haven't been hacked, I promise. This is a bug that we've just deployed, and they shouldn't have done that. Now, their share price has tanked a lot. I think they've tanked over 20% since the incident. I don't know if they've recovered much since. Microsoft's share price did also tank, only a few percentage points. But again, that's because at first nobody knew it was a CrowdStrike issue. They thought it was a Microsoft issue, and so shareholders were like, "Oh, you guys are screwed," and so they were starting to dump stock until it was realized that that's not Microsoft's fault. And it's funny because I can tell Microsoft are not happy that they immediately got the blame for this. I think Frank Shaw, their sort of head of communications, has come out with a statement saying, or criticizing the media for incorrectly reporting this. I think Satya Nadella has tweeted about it as well, commenting on how they were helping CrowdStrike sort of recover a number of these PCs. I think there's debate it's up to debate whether or not Microsoft can be blamed here a little bit, because why would Windows be designed to just not boot if there's a faulty driver there? And Is it bad design that there's no easy recovery method if you get into that position? These are conversations people are having right now, and I'm sure Microsoft are having it internally. I'm sure there's a conversation going on right now as to whether or not they should include the word Windows in the BSOD and recovery screens. Just change it to operating system. Why do people need to know it's Windows? I don't know.
Just chime in quickly. So their stock, CrowdStrike, is down 32% for the past month. It's actually up today by 0.12%.
Oh, that's good.
So, but interestingly, for the year, you're still up 70%.
Nice.
So they were making some very nice gains right up until that event happened. My hunch is I know people always, for some reason, pay attention to the stock prices when this stuff happens, as if it's some sort of systemic, it could be a systemic thing, right? With CrowdStrike, there's clearly some issues internally about how they validate these updates that needs to be looked at. That said, I think when people turn to stock prices immediately, it's just sort of like it's like rubbernecking on a highway when you see a car crash or something, right? It doesn't change anything. I think people look at it, but it's temporary. My bet is they recover just fine in a couple of weeks, a month, and people forget about this. I think your point about, this is what it would be like if we experience a cyber attack is super important. I guarantee you, state actors were watching this as a simulation almost of how people were reacting. And how the system could fail. Luckily, there was not a single conspiracy theory on Twitter about this event. Of course, Zach's laughing because that's all there were was conspiracy theories, right? Because we live in that age now where something major happens, it's immediately CrowdStrike comes out, goes, it's our fault. Their stock plummets. Microsoft is like, it's not really our fault, it's their fault. Their stock plummets. But somehow, no, this was all planned by people. So I believe there was some saying because the Republican National Convention was going on, this was just a way to screw with the MAGA people, which to me is just so it's just that view of no, I'm the center of the universe. And so when things happen in the world, it obviously happened because of my beliefs. And it's just most of the world doesn't really care about you. So there was no conspiracy. There is no conspiracy here. I think this is, instead though, it does show the problem. And this is what I've always harped on about capitalism. One of my issues with it is it's fundamentally incoherent. At its core, which is that every firm wants to be the best. And by the best, I mean they want to be a monopoly, right? It's every firm's goal to be a monopoly. They want nothing more. Microsoft would love nothing more than for Linux and Mac OS to disappear off the face of the earth. Sure, there'd be arguments of you need competition and it helps us keep strong. And yeah, that's great textbook stuff. And that makes sense for the consumer. For a business, no, it doesn't make sense at all. Businesses want to be a monopoly, 100%. And that's why, unfortunately, sometimes you do need government intervention or something to counter that. The reason I bring this up is because Windows is the dominant desktop operating system. I believe it's around 72% still. You could say Mac OS has, gained a percent here, a percent there over the last decade. And it's true, they've had some success, but and Linux too, especially with the different form factors of computers that are out there now. But Microsoft is still the dominant one. CrowdStrike is also very dominant in their field. And when you take two dominant players, and one knocks down the other one falls down, and as it's falling down, knocks down the other, you get this. And it shows, the danger of having a lot of your technology, reliance on central structures that don't have backups. I don't know what the solution to that is, right? Because the benefit of having an operating system that is as widely used is you get more options. Of course, for companies to buy stuff, there's a lot more innovation that happens because people can target that platform. And it's also hard to change, right? I know there was probably someone out there that day going, "This is it. This is the moment where everybody wakes up and realizes Linux is the answer." I'm sure those people were out there, but that won't change things. So, it does show the dangers in our system, but you could also say the same thing about satellites and the internet itself, right? It's been widely reported, Russia and other countries have plans to screw up each other's internet. Russia supposedly has a satellite in space that no one knows really what it's for. There's been rumors it's a nuclear weapon, and there have been tests. There was actually a test. I forgot the name of it now. It was done in the 1960s. The United States actually sent a nuclear bomb into space, which you can go look it up. I laugh at it because it's just like, really? And it exploded. And the idea was to see the effects of what happens of it exploding in space. And I mean, like in our atmosphere, just above our atmosphere. As you can imagine, there were ramifications from this, including knocking out a bunch of satellites. It apparently knocked out the very first satellite that was used to broadcast TV, I think. But the countries are experimenting with that technology. We're coming up with some way to jam satellites. Not necessarily the problem if you blow up an atom bomb in this low satellite orbits is not only do you destroy all those satellites, but now that debris is going to go around the Earth and orbit rapidly, meaning you can't put any other satellites into that space. If you thought cleaning the ocean was going to be hard, cleaning space is pretty hard too. So jamming may be a more easier thing, but it's also the cables that connect the continents that run the main fiber for the internet is also prime targets. So this stuff could get knocked out, and we could easily revert to a world without internet, or at least severely hampered internet, right? And so much of our infrastructure relies on it, right? Even money is digital, right? Which is why you have people hoarding gold, in case the world stops. I don't think that's going to happen. It could happen, but I could also just be walking my dog tonight, get hit by a car. So I think that's actually more likely, unfortunately. But there you go. That's a CrowdStrike thing. I don't think we need to dwell on it too much. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. Hopefully everybody learned something. I do believe it is unfortunate the blue screen of death keeps getting this sort of bad press. I kind of want them to change it to something cute and just adorable. Like, remember the Twitter fail whale?
Yeah.
Like, it used to be kind of funny. You'd go on Twitter back in the day and it would be down. And it would just have that whale, the little birds trying to. It was cute. Microsoft can't do that, though. I think people would be like, no, you're supposed to be professional. But it would be nicer if they had a more relaxing BSOD.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, Zach?
Not really. Only that to say sorry to its customers, CrowdStrike did send out $10 Uber Eats gift cards to all of their clients. So hopefully,
I love
that is such a big FU, isn't it? That's so rude. Also, I will say, lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place. I feel like now CrowdStrike's gone through this, they're probably going to be the most secure and stable cybersecurity company in the world. What are the chances that they do this again? Probably never, right? So if you're an enterprise looking for a cybersecurity software suite, they're probably the ones to go for now. So maybe give them a call. Right, we can probably move on to our next topic.
I just want to point out quickly, Colton in comments says that our CrowdStrike rep is promising serious changes to Q&A going forward, which seems obvious. That sort of oversight shouldn't happen. And then goes on to say that I would say on a personal level, since the CS outage, we have been seeing a huge spike in spear social engineering attacks and malicious network activity against our web apps, etc. Which, everybody's going to try to exploit this stuff while the guard is down for some people. That's always kind of a threat.
Yeah.
Right,
moving on to our next topic, we're going to talk about a little bit about Bing for once. Microsoft announced yesterday a big sort of update to Bing in regards to the sort of search results page. We've seen Google sort of toying with this sort of idea in the last couple of months with Gemini answers in in Google search results, and now Microsoft is sort of doing its own thing, but they're sort of taking it a step further. They're integrating it way more deeply based on what they've shown in their announcement. They're announcing generative search, and this basically combines the sort of way of traditional internet search with AI-powered large language model search, and they're merging it together on the same page. So when you type in a query, you will get usually a question-based query. If you're just looking for a website or something, then I'm sure it'll just give you the answer straight up without having to use some sort of AI to do that. But if you ask sort of a question, if you're looking for an answer and you type that into a search engine, Microsoft is going to sort of give you a combination of both AI generated and traditional search results. So you'll get an answer sort of box at the very top, which is AI generated, and that will pull in obviously information from sources, which it will then list below that like a sort of traditional search results. So if you don't really care for the answer above, you can scroll down and click into the actual websites to learn more if you prefer doing that the old school way. The sidebar will now be used for all traditional search results. So if you type a question in, you'll get that AI stuff on the front, but all of the traditional search results will show up on the right-hand side. So you can just look there if you're not bothered by the AI stuff as well. And then Microsoft is also going to sort of sprinkle in a little bit more AI sort of jazz when you type in a question. So it will give you a document index. So if you type a question, there's usually sort of branching topics that you may want to learn more about. And so it will filter those in as well below the answer and sort of sources links. So if you want to scroll down and learn more about the thing you've asked for, you can do that, and you can click in to learn more about the different topics on that particular subject. Microsoft has said that the new experience combines the foundation of Bing search results with the power of large and small language models. It understands the search query, reviews millions of sources of information, dynamically matches content, and generates search results in a new AI-generated layout to fulfill the intent of the user's query more effectively. So Microsoft says they are testing this currently with a very small subset of users, so it's not available to most people yet, if you are a Bing user, that is, but they will likely begin rolling this out to more people in the coming months. Now, Microsoft does go to some extra lengths to sort of mention how this affects publishers and sort of source websites. So if you type in a query, usually in traditional search, you'd type a query, you'd click a link, that you'd go to that website, the website gets a hit. If you see any ads on it, they get a bit of money. That's how that usually goes. But with the AI stuff, these AIs have been scraping the information from the websites and presenting it straight away. And so websites aren't getting those hits anymore. And so they're losing viewership and less money. And so there's been a bit of concern that, this uprising of AI and search and stuff could kill off a bunch of websites. Microsoft reckons that this new sort of search experience that they've built with AI doesn't affect viewership. So users will click into links just as much as they normally do through traditional search using this interface. Obviously, time will tell if that's true. Microsoft could be lying. We don't know. That just because they're saying it doesn't necessarily mean that's true. But they reckon that this design, at the very least, should maintain a healthy web ecosystem. I think the words they said, because that is important. Because the AI feeds off the source material from websites. If those websites shut down, the AI won't have anything to source from, and so the AI gets dumber, and everything crashes and burns at that point. And so Microsoft needs these websites to stick around, and so they need to do everything they can to ensure that people are still going into those websites and reading that content directly there. Otherwise, they're going to lose out on viewership and money.
Two things I was just going to add to that. One, I know my own behavior, which of course is anecdotal, but I do find myself to be perfect. No, I'm just kidding. But the way I browse the web and I use Bing and I get these results, I often do click through because while it does give me an answer and a little bit of context, it depends. There are definitely some people who are like, I just need to know the fact. How deep is the Grand Canyon, right? That's the one everybody always talks about. But like a lot of times I want to learn about stuff. So I'll click through then to get even more information, the more context about it. So it kind of does depend on, what are you looking for? That immediate just, a single digit number, how many Americans, live in the United States kind of thing, right? Or are you looking for broader answers that are summarized that allows you to kind of click through? I'll also add, anecdotally, but much more data driven, and I won't reveal the specific numbers, but I've seen for future, and we run our company runs Tom's Hardware, Tom's Guide, Tech Radar, basically the biggest tech sites in the world. We also run Homes and Garden and Mademoiselle and all those. We've actually seen positive gains from Bing search results since they started using AI and assisted. Now, it's not necessarily this generative search thing here, but they've been doing this kind of experimenting with summarizing data and all this stuff. We actually saw an increase, so people are kind of clicking through, which is very contradictory to now. Granted, Bing's search results compared to Google is, it's not even the same. So whether it applies for Google, I can't say. But obviously, the theme out there right now is this is going to be completely destructive to websites because people won't click through. I think it's a valid concern, but I'm also not one of these doomsdayers who are like, oh my God, this is going to destroy print media or online media. Like I said, I think it depends on that user at that moment. Are they looking for just that quick single answer just to like in a trivia contest, or are they actually looking to learn more? And I think user behavior is a little bit more complicated than what people let on to believe. So that's not saying that this won't change the industry. I'm just not as negative about it. That said, I do think that these companies need to work more closely with media companies and try to optimize things and make sure, that's not a complete ripoff of content. So I actually like the Bing. Do you have access to these? I do.
I don't.
These little summaries.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I
it's
don't.
because I probably use Bing. I'm one of these people. I'm always asking questions. I'm always trying to learn, and I'm always looking up stuff. So maybe I'm one of the people who are getting access to this stuff. But I don't know. I like all this. I think this is all amazing. Uh, as I said about AI months ago, if you're really into learning and you're just like a self-teacher and you like to go out and just read about things all the time, like this AI stuff is just absolutely amazing. And I get a lot of people like to highlight the flaws. I haven't really come across many times though. I've got some like wrong answer or something that
Yeah.
wasn't correct.
This is, I think, my issue with it currently is that the I don't know if I can trust it, and the reason for that is obviously when this technology first came about, it was very wrong a lot of the time, and so I think that first impression has stuck with me, and so now if I type a question into somewhere and it generates me an AI answer, and I see that was AI generated, I do the extra legwork to go and check anyway, just
Yeah,
automatically, and so. I don't know. I don't know if we're ever going to get to a point where I don't do that now. Is there a moment where Microsoft or Google or whoever's doing this AI stuff comes out and says the AI is now perfect? It won't be wrong. I don't think there is. I don't think. I mean, obviously they can reduce it and reduce it, but there's never a chance where it will just be perfect all the time. So, if that's the case, then you're going to have to check every answer every time because you never know. It may be 95% right, but what if the answer you've just been generated is the 5% wrong answer? And so I don't know. I don't know how we move on from that. And so I think it's quite bold that Microsoft is sort of essentially prioritizing the AI answer in traditional search now, but over classic search results, which are still there and
I
they are
think.
both on page they're there at the same time. So
Yeah, I think these problems are totally solvable. For one, I approach this like an academic because that was my background. Like I talked about, even in college, if you had to write a term paper, and I was a political science major before I went to hard sciences, but like when I was writing my political science stuff and it was citing history and I was using quotes, of course you had to have all your citations at the end. And your
yeah,
citations couldn't have been nonsense, right? Like today it'd be like way harder because I think a lot of kids would be like citing like weird web pages and stuff like that versus established, academic journals. But like the reason you put that there is my professors would look at my citations and my sourcing, and that would be part of my grade slash how effective my paper was, right? That was the reason you put that. You didn't just put that there just to check a mark and be like, see, I got 3 pages of sourcing. Uh, the idea was no, that stuff had to be verified, and we focused a lot on sourcing, and that's different today in the digital world because of websites. Anybody can open up a website, and you have social media, of course. You and I just literally experienced this last night, right? You sent a tweet into our Telegram
yeah,
that was uh, a screenshot of someone saying that they just exposed Twitter's API, uh, and it reveals that there's like a whitelist for right wing commentary, Twitter users, and they're allowed to use all this type of language and not get banned. And it's one of those things, if you're on the left, you read that and you just saw that screenshot and you just said, I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew it. No one's surprised. And that's literally what all the comments were, right? I knew it. No one was surprised. I saw like one person go, like, where was this info from? This screenshot kind of looks fake. There's no like data. And some people in our Telegram were like, I knew it, and like, yeah, it makes sense. But like I looked up and they were like, there's no story about a Twitter API, you know, breach or data coming out from it. And so it looked like a total nonsense thing. But when you put this information out there, if you want to believe it, and if you're on the left and you saw this, you're like, I want to believe that because it feels right and it feels true. And some of these people who you would think are normally probably pretty smart in their real life were just like hook, line, and sinker. Just because, and you're like, why do you believe this? Well, I just saw a screenshot on Twitter from like a no-name like Twitter handle, right? It wasn't like Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal. It wasn't anything like that, right? So how you can kind of solve this stuff? One, it comes back down to brand authority, right? There is a reason why you have established brands that earn trust, in theory. The other one is Microsoft could partner with websites that get like a verification kind of system here that say, no, this is a valid source, by which I mean they're not using AI to write their articles, and they have a reputation, right? So I think there are ways to sort of solve this. And even with machine learning, you can use that to verify sites, right? But it's an important problem. And I think it's one as we also need in our schools, to be honest. We need people to be educated on how to, verify sourcing. I am amazed at all the times like people are just like, well, I believe it because I just saw it on Twitter. And it's just like, really? That's all it took. But people have their biases and they're going to fall for it. And so people need to really kind of get out of that. And you see it, it's not a left-wing thing, it's not a right-wing thing. They're both equally freaking stupid. A lot of the people on this planet are stupid and just not educated in this stuff. And it's a shame because it's going to run to some danger, I think, eventually.
Yeah. So real quick on the subject of Bing, while we're here, I think we're done with the generative search announcement. Like I said, it's rolling out to a small subset of users. More users will get it over the coming months. There was a report yesterday that I think our news editor is currently writing up as we speak, from a website called searchengineland.com, who got a statement from Microsoft who says Reddit is blocking Bing from crawling their site now. And apparently it's not just Bing, but it's a lot of websites. It's any website that isn't Google. And so what this means is you're going to start not seeing Reddit search results if you're using Bing or DuckDuckGo or Yahoo or whatever search result engine you may use that isn't Google. Microsoft said in a statement, we respect the robots.txt standard. Bing stopped crawling Reddit after they implemented their updated robots.txt file on July 1st, which prohibits all crawling of their site. Now, there's some theories around why Reddit would do this. Some are tying it back to Reddit's partnership or deal with Google and AI, which they struck up, I think, a couple months back. That deal allows Google to crawl Reddit, essentially. They paid Reddit to use their data. And so that means you will see Reddit search results when you type in a question quite more often than not. And if you're using Gemini, Gemini will pull from Reddit to give you answers. Copilot and now Bing won't be able to do that because Reddit's now blocking them from doing that. Reddit released a statement to somebody at The Verge saying, this is not at all related to our recent partnership with Google. We have been in discussions with multiple search engines. We have been unable to reach agreements with all of them since some are unable or unwilling to make enforceable promises regarding their use of Reddit content, including their use for AI. So this is very clearly stemmed in the recent uprise of AI and scraping data and stuff. Reddit's trying to protect itself, trying to keep its readership up as high as possible. It's struck a deal with Google. They're paying Reddit a big amount, I imagine, to use their data, and so that offsets the maybe the reduced readership coming from Google search results and AI. Bing, I guess Microsoft wasn't able to streak up stroke up a same deal, I guess. I don't know. But it is very interesting that this is happening here. And I think this is the first of perhaps many big sites trying to do this, trying to make deals with companies to scrape data. And if they're not able to come to a deal, then blocking results from, especially the AI side of things, with, I guess, robots.txts and whatnot. What are your thoughts on that, Dan?
Yeah, it's a real, obviously, websites need to protect their data.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of skepticism here. I think the risk is like we don't know all the details. Reddit's trying to be a little transparent here, and if we're assuming that what they're saying is accurate, then they're right versus Google paid and so Google gets the results. Yeah, I think if it's one of those, Reddit, we talked to Microsoft, they couldn't guarantee us these things, so no deal. Fair. If it's we talked to Microsoft, but we have a deal with Google that's exclusive, so there is no deal with Microsoft.
Yeah.
That's bad. And I think that's where the gray area is. Reddit saying one thing, the implication is something else. So hopefully it's it's just the fact that Microsoft is the one that can't meet their demands versus it's an exclusive thing. Because if Google just goes around throwing cash around, making these exclusive deals, then again, Google's already on everyone's radar when it comes to being a monopoly. So I think they'd be dangerously playing with fire if they did this and these contracts came out. But we'll have to see. But yeah, it's obviously Microsoft doesn't seem to be too bothered at the moment for it. Yeah, I don't know. Reddit's become like a real interesting bellwether for a lot of this stuff. So
yeah,
I was just gonna say quickly, but Microsoft has struck up deals with companies. Semaphore is a newer news site, came out I think the last 2 years. They have a deal with Microsoft, and they use Microsoft's AI both sometimes to summarize their own articles, not write their articles, but do summaries, as well as for translations, so they can have their articles done quickly in other languages, which is interesting. So Microsoft's making its own moves in this space too. In fact, when you go to Semaphore, you'll see like a little thing, like a disclaimer saying this with Microsoft's logo and all this. It's almost like a little advertisement for it. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have noticed Reddit results pop up in Google a lot more these days. And so if any sort of query you type, you'll find a Reddit link, maybe sometimes first or usually second or third in the list. And then it will even have like sublinks within that link, so you can click on straight from the search results. So you have like 5 different Reddit links in one result. And so
the problem with Reddit is
I don't like
it gets back to my authority thing.
Yeah.
They often lack it. Like I've gone to, I'll do searches on Reddit for things, but like a lot of times when you get that answer in Reddit, or that's surfaced by a search engine, like it's literally some guy on the internet is just saying this. And there is no way to immediately verify the validity of that or why you should trust it outside of it had a lot of upvotes.
Yeah.
But like, social engineering of these types of things is not just because something has a lot of upvotes doesn't mean it's true. It just means a lot of people agree with it. But whether or not those people are right to begin with remains to be seen. Like, I don't find Reddit to be this source of information that people think it is. I think it's a good supplementary source. So you already know a lot about something. Like if I was looking up a new Samsung TV, right? I would go read, Tom's Guide. I would go read Tech Radar. I would go read their full reviews on it by established people who've been in the business for like a decade, right? And then eventually I might go to Reddit to see what people are talking about as far as a community discussion about that TV and personal feedback. It would be still very anecdotal, but you'd get that real world kind of feedback and commenting, system. But I wouldn't rely on anything from Reddit as my first and go-to. See,
Yeah.
This person said it, therefore it must be true. And I think that's the danger with Reddit in general, which is funny. I used to be such a huge user of Reddit, but I'm one of those people now of like, I barely go on Reddit. I don't find a lot of people's discussions and thoughts on this stuff smart. And I'm talking about various topics. Some of it's technology, some of it's politics. I don't know. It's a little all over the place for me. Do you use Reddit at all?
Not as no, I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm a redditor. I do go on there sometimes to read up on, say, like Windows and industry stuff.
Sure.
So I follow it. I use it for technology news and just to see what people are saying about a certain topic or news story within the Microsoft Windows tech space. But I'm not using it. I don't follow general news. I don't get world news from there. I'm not in there commenting on things usually or replying to people about politics or whatever it may be or funny cat videos. I'm not using it for, I think, what most people use it for, and so. I don't know if I'm in the minority now. I don't know. Is Reddit bigger than Twitter? It might be. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, is it bigger?
Twitter
Tiny,
is comparatively very small for social networks.
It's funny because I view Reddit as like a sort of because Twitter wants to be the front page of the internet. They want to be like the town square. I think Elon Musk describes it as, but that's not. I think Reddit serves that purpose way more.
Yeah.
It's much bigger, and they call themselves the front page of the internet. I think that's their tagline, and I think that's way more appropriate for Reddit. But I still somehow. Sorry, go on.
Reddit has moderators.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but I still view Reddit as like a. It's really only for people who are nerdy or like technology driven. People who are sort of chronically online. It's still not for the general public, if you will, and so I think that it's skewed in that certain way. The other thing I was going to say is, how do you think Digg feels right now? Because
well, that's always the case.
Yeah, they must be gutted that they missed out on all of this. I don't know how they fumbled up so badly, but Digg was, for those who don't know, Digg was essentially the original Reddit, if you will. They were like the people went to Digg to talk about news stories and discussions and comments and whatnot. Reddit came about, and I think, if I remember rightly, Digg released an update that changed their website design, and nobody liked it, and Digg crashed and everybody diverted to Reddit, and Reddit took off, and now they're striking up deals with Google for millions of dollars to use their data. So RIP Digg and whoever decided to release a new website design. Right, we should. Are you done, Dan? If you've got anything else to say?
Yeah.
Cool. Right, let's move on then. Let's start talking about some Windows 11 stuff. It's been a while. We'll start with the version 24H2 stuff because this is a weird release. We've talked about it before, but it's technically out now if you're running a Copilot Plus PC. If you're not running a Copilot Plus PC, it's not out yet. It's coming later this year as an update. You can technically get it early if you join the Insider Release Preview program, but if you're not in any preview program, you're currently still running likely version 23H2 or 22H2. Dan, you've been using Copilot Plus PCs over the last couple of weeks, not regarding the actual hardware itself, more the software side. How have you been finding 24H2? Have there been any standout features other than the AI stuff, which is technically a separate thing? Is there anything in Windows that you've come across? Because if you haven't noticed, I wouldn't blame you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I do like a lot of the AI stuff related to like Paint. I like how they're kind of Paint and Photos has a better flow between them. Like you can jump, if you're in Paint, you can open it in Photos, or if you're in Photos, you can edit it in Paint kind of thing. I like that. I think those are smart moves. The only thing I really notice most of is the, and I don't even know what you call it, the quick links in the taskbar, for getting to your Wi-Fi and everything.
Yeah, the quick settings.
Quick settings. That's moved around, like they've added things, and I find they don't allow you to direct edit it anymore. I'm still confused about that.
So you just click and hold and drag on anything. So if you want to move something, you click and drag it.
So like, how was I supposed to know that? And
right.
So, and are there things, and I can't hide anything?
You can't hide anything, yeah. So you have to just arrange it so the things that you want to access most, you move them to the top, and then you just shove the stuff you don't want to the bottom.
So for those who don't know, previously there was a little pencil icon on the bottom part of it, and you can hit that, and then it would go into an edit mode, and then you can move around stuff, add things, remove things, and all that. Now, it was limited to like 2 rows, which was stupid, so now you have more rows. But but I don't really like that. So they do give you access to new things like live captions and, of course, the studio effects, which is nice. But other than that, why don't you go through the features? I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Because right now, you're right. I don't have anything off the top of my head.
So again, I'm not including Copilot Plus features for this because that's technically exclusive to new stuff. This is for everybody who will install version 24H2. So the biggest ones for me, at least, were some of the File Explorer and context menu updates. With this release, now when you right-click on something in File Explorer, you'll actually get the sort of, the most common actions such as cut, copy, paste, rename at the very top, and they're now labeled. That wasn't the case previously. They were, I think, at the bottom of the context menu, and they weren't labeled. And so if you didn't really understand the icon that it had been sort of assigned to it, you wouldn't know which one was cut, copy, and paste. And that was difficult for a lot of people, I think, moving to Windows 11. And so they've sort of restored that with the labels now. So it's a lot clearer to see which one is what when you're right-clicking on stuff. They've also added to the File Explorer the ability to create 7-zip and tar file archives. You were previously able to read and extract them, but you weren't able to create new ones. You can now do that in the File Explorer with version 24H2, which is pretty cool. The quick settings stuff, as you mentioned, Dan, is here as well. So they've redesigned the quick settings thing. It's now faster, which is nice. So it doesn't take as long to load if you've just booted Windows. But yeah, you're right. They've changed how you customize it. And I agree with Dan's criticisms there. It is a little bit more confusing and it's a lot more messy because you can't hide buttons anymore. I'm currently in the process of writing my review for 24H2 right now. And I mentioned that because I also found that to be a little bit annoying. But it is paginated now, or paginated. So you can scroll up and down, as I mentioned. There's more rows versus before you could only have 2 rows of 3 icons. So that's nice as well. Voice clarity is a feature that is coming in version 24H2, and it was originally a sort of its Surface NPU exclusive for like the Pro X and the Laptop Studio 2. Which is now coming to all Windows 11 PCs that upgrade to version 24H2. Voice clarity is an AI-powered microphone enhancement feature. So what it does is it analyzes the background and tries to mute it out. And now that's coming to all PCs, so that will likely run off the CPU, I imagine. And it applies to any app that uses the communication signal processing mode, which I think is quite a few apps now. And so you will get better audio quality as a result of this using your dedicated mic, your built-in mic, whatever it may be. If you've just been using the standard sort of Windows setup there, voice clarity will now make it so background chatter and maybe a fan or something will be tuned out. So that's a really cool feature to see coming to Windows 11. They've updated Energy Saver. So they've updated Battery Saver, which is now called Energy Saver, and it now applies to Windows desktops that don't have a battery, as well as laptops when they're plugged in. And the reason for that is they've sort of changed up how Windows conserves energy. In the past, I think they just sort of dimmed the brightness on a laptop and maybe turned off the backlight and keys and maybe even reduced the CPU slightly. But now Energy Saver goes a bit further than that. It can also, on desktops, it can reduce the power it's pulling from the wall. So if you're somebody who's quite conscious about that, you can enable Energy Saver and you can have it on permanently. There's an option to just keep it on. And so if you're on a desktop, you can make it so Windows is taking less power from the wall, which is really nice. And they do it by reducing system performance as well as services and processes. So they'll sort of stop some services in the background from running to sort of make Windows run lighter, which is nice. And then there's some general polish and stuff here and there. And I'm sure we're going to see more later this year with some further feature updates, such as, I think they've already announced it. We'll talk about it in a minute, but like phone link and start, that's going to come at some point to version 24H2, and I think probably 23H2 as well. But there's a lot of general polish here in general. So a lot of the older inbox apps have been removed, such as WordPad, Mail, Calendar, Cortana, Maps, and People. That's all gone. Windows Update is getting some improvements. Hot patching is now a thing on clients, although I don't know how often they're planning to use that. But hot patching, for those who don't know, is a method of updating Windows where Microsoft it can apply bug fixes and critical updates without requiring a restart. They've been using this on Windows Server and on Xbox for a long time, and now it's coming to the Windows client as well, so that's pretty cool. And then there's also a new feature called checkpoint updates, which are designed to reduce the overall size of monthly cumulative updates. So if you've already got XYZ update, but there's now a couple more things in the newest update. Instead of re-downloading the entire thing, which I think is what Windows used to do, it will now just download the extra bits that you haven't got. And so I think that's what Microsoft is calling checkpoint updates. So a lot of Windows updates, improvements there as well. There's some updates to the out-of-box experience. You can now sort of directly install a driver using a GUI. There's a button there now. If you're a system builder, it's going to be very handy. And there is also, what was it? The Copilot app is different. It's now a dedicated web app. It was always a web app, but it was previously in a sidebar. Now it's an actual window, so you can resize it, you can snap it side by side, you can pin it and unpin it from the taskbar like a normal app. The only downside to it currently is that it's actually less functional than the old Copilot in regards to it being a Windows assistant. It no longer understands any Windows commands. So if you were using it to do things like turn dark mode on or open apps or whatever it may be, it no longer can do that, at least for now. Maybe they're going to change that in the future, but for now it's technically a regression in regards to Windows specific things. It's still the same Copilot though, so you can still ask it complex questions and it will do its best to find answers and whatnot. And actually, lastly, Prism, the emulation layer for Windows with 24H2 is actually quite a big deal for Windows and ARM devices, not just for the new Copilot Plus stuff, but for older Windows and ARM devices. So if you're using a Surface Pro X or ThinkPad X13S or a Robo and Kala, or if we customize back even further, the older Lenovo Windows and ARM devices, or anything that was a Windows and ARM device since 2017, the HP Elite X2, I think it was, or NVX2, that 2-in-1 from HP, one of the first ones. I think it had a Snapdragon 845 or something like that. If you install version 24H2, you're going to have a better experience with this version. Windows in general is just a little bit more performance, and app emulation is more performance as well. Sometimes even up to 10% better performance in emulated apps versus version 23H2. So those are the sort of big version 24H2 changes and stuff that are coming with this release that aren't Copilot Plus specific. Obviously, the big actual blockbuster 24H2 feature will be Windows Recall when that eventually rolls out, but that again will only be to a subset of users, and that's not even here yet, so that is yet to come. This is a weird update. It's very much a platform update. It's a lot of under the hood improvements here and there. There's a few surface level changes and whatnot. It's more about polish versus genuinely like new features and stuff. There's a lot of AI here, but there's been AI across Windows for ages now, and it's just being added here, tweaked there, and so it's really hard to sort of clarify or determine what's actually new specifically to 24H2 there. But everything else I've mentioned here is pretty much 24H2 exclusive, and so yeah, as I mentioned, this is not yet available for the general Windows 11 audience. This is coming later in the year, likely September or October timeframe. And when it comes, it will be a nice update, I think. I don't see any real downsides to it. If anything, your PC will run better. They've done a lot of sort of optimization to the platform to just improve performance in general. So that is pretty cool. I think we can sort of move on to what's also coming for Windows, because obviously the Windows Insider program is still rolling, and we're still able to take a look at those builds and see sort of teases and hints at what's coming next for Windows. I briefly mentioned it a minute ago, but the start menu is getting the ability to show your phone information. We may have talked about it in the podcast before, I can't remember, it's been a month, but you're getting like a panel, like a side panel now, so you'll be able to sort of open start, you'll see your pinned apps, your recent documents and stuff, and then in a sort of floating panel on the side, you'll see your phone information via phone link, which is really cool. And this is it's supposed to be interoperable, so I think you'll be able to even add another panel on the other side for another thing that Microsoft may be working on. I don't know, but for now it will be phone link, which is really cool. They've also announced the taskbar system tray is getting a little bit of an update. They're trying to simplify it a little bit, so they're trying out a design that removes the notification bell icon, so that sort of saves up some space, and they're also going to remove the year on the dates and time there. So I mean, most people know what year it is, so we don't need to see it in the taskbar, and so they're going to get rid of that, so that makes the system tray date and time button a lot smaller, and so the system tray itself is much smaller as a result, which is really nice. They're also adding animations to app thumbnail previews. Right now, Windows 11 doesn't have that, shockingly. Windows 10 and Windows 8 and Windows 7 did. They removed it with Windows 11 when they redid the taskbar. They're finally getting around to adding back that animation, which is kind of cool. And they're also making some changes to the system tray, so it will now show when you have Windows Studio Effects enabled, a little icon will actually appear in the taskbar to say, hey, Studio Effects are currently active. You can click here to customize it and do what you want to do there, which is kind of cool as well. So that's just some. Oh no, there's one more thing for the start menu that I remembered. They're trying out, or at least working on, a bunch of different layouts for the apps list, the all apps list. Right now it's an alphabetical list really, but it looks like they're working on two new designs. One that mimics the sort of the Android app drawer. So if you swipe up on an Android phone, you get like a grid of icons. They're trying that UI for the all apps list, and then they're also trying one that's much more like the iOS app library. For those who have an iPhone, you'll know if you swipe over to get your all apps list, it's actually sort of like a categorized grid of icons versus just an alphabetized grid or whatever it may be. They're trying that for Windows as well. So if you were to have that enabled and clicked all apps, you'd see a bunch of different categories like news and weather, productivity, social media, whatever the categories may be, and in there you'd see like the different icons for apps, and that's automatically done for you. That's not something the user customizes. Windows just determines which app goes into which category, and so that will be interesting to see if that ships as well. But it's good to see Microsoft at least toying with new designs and layouts for things like the start menu and taskbar. We're at a point now in Windows 11's lifecycle where it really is just tweaking stuff. Windows Recall is a new feature, of course, but in regards to like the shell and whatnot, we're not seeing anything drastically new here. Just tweaks to things and changes to the existing sort of paradigm that is Windows 11. So that's pretty cool to see. We'll keep you updated on when those are officially announced. And with that, Dan, it's your turn to talk about the Copilot Plus hardware.
Nah. So there's a lot to unpack here. See how many devices I can get through. Surface Pro 11, the review's up. It's my longest review ever written. I think it's nearly 7,000 words. Lots of images and details there. The TLDR, I love it. I've had every single Surface Pro since the first one. I even link to the original photos of the Surface RT launch in 2012 in New York City, where Panos Panay and his team were there at midnight, where they went on sale. It was such a big deal that happened with Microsoft's first computer, right?
Yeah.
So I've had every single device, and I've always liked the Surface Pros because there's simply nothing like it, right? Granted, we have seen other Windows OEMs try to make similar devices with some success here and there, but you know what I mean? Like, there's rarely been something better than the Surface Pro. HP came close a couple times, though. HP has some really cool ones. That said, there's no doubt that form factor had a lot of drawbacks. One, you couldn't put the fastest processor in there. Whatever processor you did put in there would be kind of thermally constrained by the form factor. You'd have to have fans, and the fans could either be loud. They got quieter over the years, but they were kind of always still there, always present. And of course, battery life was always compromised. But nothing gave you this ability to have this like form factor of like a tablet that's also a PC. And I'm not even a tablet guy. Like, I don't like tablets, but I just like using it as a laptop and then being able to throw it into a tablet mode or quickly taking notes on it when I need to. Surface Pro 11 for me solves basically all the complaints. The new processor, the Snapdragon X Elite, is so good. And it's not just me saying that. I was having a discussion with over at Tom's Guide and Mark Spoonhour, who runs that, and like he agrees too. Like, it's just been pretty much, I don't want to say over delivering, it's delivered exactly what Qualcomm said it would. But in the Pro 11, for battery life, I'm getting real world 10 hours usage, and I put that in there as using a Windows battery report. If you don't know, in Windows, you can generate a report at any time that gives you your full battery charge and discharge rates and usage. And it's going to list that by basically days. And then at the end, it gives you an average. So if you use your device, you're using your device for like weeks or months, so you use that, you'll get your real world average for battery life. But you also see the highest and the lowest. The lowest I got was, I think it was 5 or 6 hours when I was gaming on it and probably doing more intensive stuff. And the most I got on it, I think, was 12 or 13 hours, but I averaged around 10 hours of just like real world usage. Put that in perspective, a Intel Surface would get you, I would say, between 5 and 8 hours at most. Actually, probably even 4. if we're going to really game on it, even less maybe. But 8 hours was like really kind of struggling, right? So the battery life has been fantastic. The performance is insane. It's one of the fastest devices I've used. It blows away Intel's Meteor Lake chips, especially on multi-core performance, which we're just having this discussion. Apple chips still win out on single core against a Qualcomm Snapdragon, but everything uses multi-core. Like I'm trying to figure out what's the validity of even reporting a single core score anymore. I'm sure there is one, but all your apps run multi-core. And so this thing, we bought a MacBook Pro 14-inch running an M3 chip so I could do the benchmarks and comparisons on. And this thing blows it away in terms of performance. It was like 15% faster on multi-core. And that's crazy because it's a 13-inch tablet compared to a 14-inch, much thicker and heavier laptop, right? Like MacBook Pro 14, I was kind of surprised at how chunky it is. It's actually a pretty thick laptop. Nice laptop, don't get me wrong. I'm not being harsh on it, but it was thicker than I thought it was. In fact, the new MacBooks is supposed to be thinner. But to have a Surface Pro 11 just like obliterate the MacBook Pro in terms of performance and run close to it with battery life, I think is really impressive. Now, keep in mind, the Surface Pro 11, out of all the ARM devices that are coming out, is going to have the worst battery life because it's the smallest form factor, right? But it's still very good. The front-facing camera is 12 megapixel, is outstanding. You combine it with the ISP software and hardware that Qualcomm does, and the new Studio Effects. It's the best webcam I've ever used. So if you're on video, it's big. The microphones are great. Speakers have always been good. No different there. Still get Dolby Atmos. The new OLED display is fantastic. It hits, I got 550 nits on max brightness at 100%, but it can, I believe, peak to 900 nits for HDR content. Either way, it's HDR 600, I think it is, certified. And it looks outstanding. They didn't do anti-glare, or anti-reflective, I should say. And I did dock it a little bit for that. I think they really should have. Their argument was the screen gets so bright now that it overcomes most glare in situations. There is truth to that. So I get the explanation. It would have looked even better, though, if it was anti-reflective. And I wasn't the only one, thankfully, saying that. A lot of other people noticed it, too. So that's still an area that could be improved. I love the new Flex keyboard. Zach did some amazing reporting telling us what was coming with the Surface Pro 11. If I'm correct, though, we didn't catch the Flex keyboard. That was a surprise. And it surprised me in a few ways because they brought so much more innovation to the device. For one, it detaches now and can act wirelessly, which is something third-party keyboards always could do because they had to rely on Bluetooth. But I think Microsoft finally realized it's actually really useful because now you can keep the computer to the side, use it as a tablet, but still have the keyboard flat. Or you can be on the airplane and just keep the keyboard in your lap and keep the Surface on your tray table. And it's not something you maybe use all the time, but when it's there, and it works flawlessly because of the new Bluetooth and all that. Like you pull it off the keyboard, it's just instantly connected. I had no stutters, no delays, no issues. So that's been great. It's a stiffer keyboard now because it's a little bit thicker because it has to have a battery in it. The typing is just, the keyboard's fantastic. And now it has a haptic touchpad, which is crazy to put into such a device. Haptics do use battery. So, it's always tricky to do that, but it's also slightly longer and even a smidge taller than all the other touchpads. But it's a fantastic touchpad. Haptics are great because it clicks evenly, and I say clicks in quotes. It's not actually moving, but it clicks evenly wherever you are. Plus, you can resize the right click if you want small, medium, or large, which I found I had to go to the medium. I was getting false clicks just because the way I was using it. But you can adjust all this stuff. And that's made by, Stencil does a lot of the technology there. Microsoft built off of Stencil's technology for it. But it's You don't need to buy the Flex keyboard. Don't get me wrong. But if you can afford it, I highly recommend it. It just feels better. And now the pen, the slim pen is always exposed, whereas before it would be hidden, which was a clever trick that they did. I thought was clever too. The problem with it when it was hidden was that to go use the pen, you had to like pull apart the surface of it, grab it, and then use it. It was a little bit of a barrier to usage where you might be like, maybe I won't use the pen. But now that it's always there in front of you, you just scoop it out and use it. And so I don't know. I know people complain that the new Flex keyboard starts at $350, goes up without a pen, and $450 with the pen. You could still buy the $140 straight up keyboard though, if you don't need that. So I don't get the complaint. And the other thing that drove me nuts was I saw a review that said like Microsoft was charging more money for all this, and they're not. It was the exact opposite. The starting price for this device now is $999. And with that, you're getting 16 gigs of RAM and was it 256 gigs of storage?
Yep, 256.
Was it 256?
Yeah.
To put that in perspective, to get that configuration last year with the Surface Pro 9, it was $1399. It was $400 more because they started off at 8 gig and 256. And the previous version before that was $1,099, and you got 8 gigs and 128 gigs of storage. So so you're getting 16 gigs to start off. And that's a requirement of the Copilot Plus stuff. You're getting 256 for $999, but that carries all the way up. So if you get the top tier version, 1 terabyte of storage and 32 gigs of RAM, it's $2,099. That's expensive. You know what was more expensive? Surface Pro 9 at $2,499 for that same model. And this is the crazy part about these new Qualcomm chips is they're cheaper than the Intel ones. In fact, the XPS 13, they make 2 versions, one with Intel and one with Qualcomm. For a little while there, the Qualcomm version was 16 gigs and I think 256 storage, and it was $1399. But the Intel version only had 8 gigs and it was $1399. They've since adjusted that because there's no way you could Intel could be like, buy our version, you'll get less RAM. So they're forcing the pricing on this stuff to be even much more affordable. But go read that review. It's already spoiled all the other devices for me. The other devices, don't get me wrong, all very good. They're all going to get very good scores. But I love the Surface Pro 11. The only way it could be better is anti-reflective display and 5G. And 5G is coming later this summer, in theory. They're waiting on certification. But you add 5G to this thing, man, it is in that blue color. Oh my God, that blue is so gorgeous.
Yeah.
They just did a wonderful job with the design of it. I think I said it's the most important Surface since both the first one and Surface Pro 3. Because if you got the Surface Pro 3, that was the one that really defined the modern design. And I think was the first Surface that people started taking seriously. And that's especially solidified by Surface Pro 4, where people are like, it's still weird to see a review where people are like, I don't understand this design or who wants to use this form factor. It's just like, listen, it's not for you. It's fine. Not everybody needs a Surface Pro device. I get it. I write my review from someone who likes Surface Pro. I think this thing was a banger. Quickly, we'll go to HP OmniBook. My review is coming out next for that. So there's the EliteBook and the OmniBook X. There's the same laptop. One is more business focused. The other one is consumer. That one starts at $1,099, although I think it was on sale for $999 too. It's an outstanding straight up clamshell laptop. There's not a lot to say about it outside of like everything on it is like a solid B+, which I know doesn't sound like maybe a ringing endorsement, but it's actually hard to get a laptop that has everything that's like really good about it. Like, so keyboard, it's a great keyboard, very responsive. I loved it. I always loved HP's keyboards. Has a huge touchpad, not haptic, but still decent display. It's like a 2.2K touch screen. Pretty good speakers on it. For the price of this thing, it's just like it's, and you wrote about this when you talked about the Surface laptop, that the Qualcomm chip just took a really good laptop and made it way better. And that's the same thing here. Like if this was an Intel laptop, I'd be like, yeah, it's all right, But because you're going to get now exceptional performance and exceptional battery life, the OmniBook and EliteBook just steps up to a whole new level. It's just like, this is just a straight up really good clamshell laptop that won't break the bank. And that's going to give you outstanding battery life and performance. And it's such a foot in the door for people who just want a solid Windows PC. So that's that one. Samsung Galaxy Book 4 Edge. I have the 16-inch with the number pad, and their beautiful super AMOLED design, which is just like, I mean, sure, everybody else gets access to AMOLED, but then when you get a Samsung device, their AMOLED is a different level. And that thing gets incredible battery life, really nice keyboard, exceptional performance. That's the one laptop that does have the top tier Snapdragon CPU in it. And it runs the best with, of course, if you have other Samsung phones. A beautiful design. I always love Samsung's designs. It's the 16-inch. It's such a massive display, but it's so thin and comparatively so light to everything else out there. They make a similar version with the RTX GPU, but of course an Intel processor if you need that. But if you don't need the RTX GPU, Samsung knocked it out of the park. They also make a 14-inch version, which I would think would also be just absolutely amazing. Let's see. Oh, the Dell XPS 13. Yeah, been using that one quite a bit too. I like Dell's keyboard. I like their futuristic XPS design a lot. The people who criticize it, I get their skepticism, but the people who criticize it are the same people who have never used it. And I highly recommend if you can go try this, like at Best Buy, you do. It's been great so far. And going by the results we're getting on battery life, this one's going to have some of the best battery life of any laptop we've seen. It's just actually, really extraordinary. And again, I can't stress the performance of these things, of how good the performance is. Even emulated apps, we put those benchmarks in there too. You're comparing it compares to like an AMD gaming laptop from like a year or two ago in terms of how it performs in emulation, which is crazy. Because if I gave you a gaming laptop with an AMD chip from 18 months ago, you would not be complaining about your Windows apps, the performance of them. And that's just emulated. When you go to running natively, it's a whole other ballpark. This thing is blowing away everything else that's out there. I'm trying to think there was anything else that I have. I think that's pretty much about it for right now for all the devices. But they're all have their own pros and cons. If you're going to go with a Samsung, it's because you really want to do I would say video and some photo editing. And you really want a large display with you. That's also not going to hurt your back. They also have very good prices and great trade-in deals. The Dell XPS 13 is perfect. The XPS 13 is great if you want something the size of a Surface Pro 11, but you don't want a tablet form factor. I find them, very similar in usage when you're using both in terms of how they feel, like in your lap and all that kind of stuff, in terms of size. You also can get 3 screen options with the Dell XPS. You can get a straight up full HD, which will give you a ton of battery life. Then you can get a 2.2K, and then I think they have a 2.8K OLED, and that OLED is the new double OLED layer. What the iPad Pro is now doing, this is the first laptop to do that. Of course, you're going to get shorter battery life with that. There's no doubts. But if you want a really amazing display, you have that option. But that's what I like about Dell. And same with the Dell. If you do the numbers, it starts at $1399, but it's still, when you go up in RAM and all this kind of stuff, it's still cheaper than a MacBook Pro 14. And you can go up to, I think, 64 gigs of RAM in the XPS 13. To do that in a MacBook Pro, I think you end up spending $900 more, because they force you You'll get a faster processor, so it'll lose there. But they force you to get the higher end chip to get the more RAM, which is really, yeah, like you just can't get an M3 chip with like 32 gigs of RAM, which is unfortunate. Yeah, that's Apple. That's what's cool about the Windows ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's just like, when I was posting with the Dell XPS 13, people were like, yeah, but that screen sucks. MacBook blows it away. I'm like, let me show you the options I have to get a double layer OLED display for it instead, right? But that's the beauty of the PC world. So I'll be honest, it's difficult to go back to current Intel laptops.
Yeah.
And I say that as I'm updating the review for the Yoga 9i, which runs Intel Meteor Lake. And that's a phenomenal laptop. It's our top recommended laptop because it's just such a cool one. That's the one that flips into a tablet that has the sound bar in the middle, has outstanding audio, has a gorgeous OLED display, great front-facing camera. It's lighter and thinner this year, and it's powerful. They have an 8 series chip in it, but the battery life's, yeah. Yeah, you're going to get 6 hours of like real world usage out of that thing, And it's just like, I don't know. It's just like the Qualcomm stuff is so far ahead in terms of efficiency. Now, I think, not to completely rip on Intel, I have high hopes for Lunar Lake. I think Lunar Lake will close that gap. And it may be enough of a gap that it's like, diminishing returns. But I still think Qualcomm is going to have the edge here. And that new Prism layer, you were talking about for emulation, you're talking about a 10 to 15% hit on performance. That's the difference you would get. But that's still so much, the bar is set so high with native performance that 10 to 15% doesn't feel like anything. I'm running Photoshop Elements 2024 emulated on the Surface Pro 11. Feels totally like a native app to me. I couldn't tell the difference. So I don't know. It's difficult to get excited about the Intel stuff out there, and AMD for that fact. I don't feel like AMD stuff is going to be, way better. I think they'll have some advantages here and there, but I don't know. Of course, you had your experience with your laptop. You bought the Surface laptop. You liked it so much. Yeah. Anything you want to add since?
Not that I haven't already said, really. I'm still using the Laptop 7 as my primary machine. I love it. I think it's great. I've not had any real compatibility issues thus far. I am on the 16 gig one. I think I mentioned this to Dan. I'm kind of tempted to swap this out for the 32 gig one because that's the one I had in for review. Only just to future-proof it, right? If I'm going to use this as my main machine and like use it as a sort of desktop replacement, I kind of think maybe having 32 gigs is just in case, in case I need it one day. But so far, 16 gig has been fine. I think 16 gig is, if I'm doing this podcast on here, I think that will probably be close to maxing it out. But I'm not. That's a rare workload for me. I'm usually just writing and interneting and listening to music and podcasts and stuff. So it's been fantastic. I've got the 15-inch model. The screen is gorgeous. I love it. It is fantastic. I am curious, Dan, because I think I think it's fair to say the Laptop 7 is it addresses all the criticisms people had about the Laptop 4, 5, and 6 in regards to design and sort of lack of innovation there. The Surface Pro 11 is let's say it's the continuation of the Surface Pro 8, perhaps, let's call it from there.
Yeah.
Where does Surface Pro go next now? What does Surface Pro 12 look like to you?
Anti-reflective display. Honestly, like outside of like, you can get into the whole like make the bezels thinner thing, right? But then like you're going to have the other people come out and say, well, it's a tablet and you want some bezels there. Oh, it doesn't have the human presence detection, which locks and auto locks your computer when you're walk away or tells you if someone's looking over your shoulder. I don't consider that a must have. It's just that is part of the Qualcomm chipset. Like that's part of the hardware, just like Intel does it too. You still need to put the sensors into the top part. So I think, Microsoft was a little bit constrained because this thing is so packly tight. I think they were a little bit constrained by the device's form factor. Plus, it probably adds a little cost too. but it would have been nice because it's something that Macs don't do. That really does showcase again the power of Qualcomm. Like I said, Intel does this. AMD laptops don't do this, as I haven't seen any. Uh, but it's really such a high tech feature that's just rad. Like you walk away from the Surface Pro and you can set it like after 15 seconds or a minute or whatever, it would auto lock your computer, and then the display goes off to save battery. And then when you walk back in front of it, you don't need to touch it. It recognizes there's a human in front of it. And so then it wakes up the display, turns on Windows Hello, then it turns the camera on, logs you in, and they call it zero touch. You don't actually even need to touch the device and you're just back in it again. I think that's a cool feature. Outside of those two things, I'm not asking for anything more for this.
Yeah.
I guess it does open a door though for a Surface Pro, right? And I know you talked about this as a possible design thing, a bigger Surface Pro, right? That goes. Do you want to just recap on what the initial plans or rumors were for that device?
So I think you're getting it mixed up. I think the rumor was it was supposed to be a smaller Surface Pro,
a smaller
11-inch
one.
one,
Okay.
Yeah, to match the iPad Pro, which has 11 and 13-inch. I was going to say that for me, I think the biggest issue I have with the Surface Pro currently is that the Surface Pro X exists, and the Surface Pro X is a thinner and lighter chassis, and that's what I kind of hope they strive to get back to, is that sort of Pro X chassis.
And I did ask him about that. So that's in the review too. I asked Microsoft about that comparison. And so the reason the Pro X was thinner, of course, was because it had no fan. And it was it wasn't even passively cooled, right? I mean, well, there was no venting on it.
Yeah.
So the heat had to stay in there. As a result, the performance can only go so high. They said, based on customer feedback, that when people buy a Surface Pro, they expect it to behave just like any other PC out there. And so because of that, had they went with a closed system or a fanless system, they couldn't push the chip to its logical end. If you look at the benchmarks, not only does it do really well, and it doesn't throttle, because like we use Cinebench, which runs for 10 minutes straight, and it still beats a Mac on multi-core. By a substantial amount too. But what was cool too is unplugged. I saw at most a 2% difference in multi-core performance, but that was within the margin of error. If you ever run Geekbench multiple times, you always get a different result depending on various issues, including the temperature of your room, But basically, there's no difference when you're running on AC or DC plugged in, which is wild, right? Because that's always something people kind of complain about. So they're not even cheating on the battery life. They didn't go like, it's throttled 20% on battery. No, it still runs at its complete max. So I guess to your point, I wouldn't mind seeing a slightly larger version, a 14-inch Surface Pro. I think could be cool, and maybe a smaller version. The thinness. Listen, they should always strive to make it as thin as possible, but it's not completely a top priority.
I'd say thinness is less of a concern for me. I think weight is more of a concern. I think the Surface Pro, for what it is quite heavy if you compare it to, say, like the iPad Pro, which I think, in regards to form factor at least, is its direct competitor. The newest iPad Pro at least, is much thinner and much lighter than the Surface Pro as standalone tablets.
Yeah, the Surface Pro 11 with the Flex keyboard and pen, I believe, was 2.6 pounds.
Yeah.
Which is basically the same weight as an XPS 13.
Right.
Now, I got to look it up. The iPad Pro with Magic Keyboard.
Yeah, but the keyboard's included. I think they're probably similar, but standalone as tablets, they're not. I know the iPad Pro is much lighter.
Looks like it's 2.3 pounds.
Yeah.
So you're right. So looks like it's slightly lighter. It's not a lot, but
it's a lot thinner, and also the M4 chip technically outperforms, I think, what's going on with the X Elite. So the iPad Pro right now sort of blows everything out of the water in regards to form factor, to power, to performance ratios. But that's an edge case. The iPad Pro is arguably a laptop, arguably not a laptop, and so I don't think you can. Like I said, you can compare them hardware alone, but when you actually compare them as complete products, they are very different. And comparing a Surface Pro to an iPad Pro kind of doesn't make much sense to a lot of people. It does make more sense to compare it to a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro. To be fair, that's my same criticism of the laptop 7 is that I think it's a little bit too heavy. If it was just a bit lighter, especially the 15-inch one, the 13-inch one I think is probably fine, but the 15-inch one is, if you compare it to the 15-inch MacBook Air, for example, the MacBook Air I believe is a touch lighter than this, and you can definitely feel it holding it in your hands.
Yep. Yeah, so that's always the case. Yeah, it is weird. I only compared it to the MacBook Pro just to show how powerful it was, because it could.
Yeah.
It's just like, I
No,
think that just sets the bar, But you're right. I don't think, and it's true, the iPad Pro would have more performance, but then the iPad Pro is on a real PC. So,
Yeah.
there's all these kind of weird trade-offs with it. But I think the Surface Pro 11 is just like, it just sets the bar now so high for this. And same with, getting back to your question about the Surface laptop, should you go to 32 gig? I would say yes. The reason is, I think the benefit of these devices now is the same double-edged blade problem that the Apple faces, which is, I think you can buy a Surface Laptop 7, 32 gigs of RAM, and hold on to that for like 4 years. I think you'll be totally happy. I think people who buy M1 MacBooks, the majority are totally happy and totally fine with both the battery life and performance on it. That they don't feel the need to get an M3 or M4, which moderately improves performance, mostly even on the GPU, right? You see most of the performance gains there.
Yeah.
But unless you're like a power user who's doing video editing where every second counts, you could hold on to these devices for a lot longer. And you're still just going to get that performance. It's really a different era. And I didn't go and watch or read reviews of the Pro 11 before I did mine, because I never want to be influenced. But then after I posted mine, I went and watched a bunch of YouTube videos. And a lot of people are saying the same thing. They're just like, this thing is, they're blown away by it and by how good it is. I think it's just outstanding, and I hope it sells well, because it's so cool.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I would say too is, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, I feel like HP, like the OmniBook and the EliteBook X are great, but they're also priced to be affordable. I feel like I've seen what HP can do in their higher end stuff, and I feel like they're holding back here just to hit that certain price target, right? Which is fine. They can do that. But I know they could do much more too and drive up the price. It'll be a more expensive device, right? But I feel like they could put in there a high-end OLED display and do some of their other tricks that they like to do, higher-end cameras and all this kind of stuff. There are so many, we haven't, besides the Surface Pro and Samsung's laptop, we haven't seen these really completely peak yet. Maybe XPS 13 too, though, I guess. But there's a lot more device form factors. I mean, for instance, the Yoga 9i, which I was just talking about, which runs Intel Meteor Lake, right? And it's a fantastic laptop. It's just the battery life isn't great. All you gotta do, if you just threw Qualcomm into that laptop, oh my God, that thing would be amazing. That would easily be, nothing could touch that, because that laptop does everything, right? That's just a straight up laptop if you want to be. That's a tablet because it comes with a pen. It has one of the best audio systems you can get in any PC. Amazing display. So I feel like, we could see so much more coming from OEMs. And I think we will. IFA is coming around the corner a couple weeks, 6 weeks from now. We'll still see some newer devices coming out there too. So I don't think we have seen anything yet. And we're expecting Gen 2 of these CPUs next summer, according to that Dell XPS leak. And the things I've heard is that Gen 2 is going to be a significant upgrade. It's not going to be like, it was 3.8 gigahertz, now it's 3.9. No, I'm hearing it's going to be a significant kind of architectural change, because these chips were technically the chips based off of their server designs, modified to go mobile, whereas I hear Gen 2 are actually designed to be their mobile chip. That remains to be seen. That's just what we're hearing. But yeah, the stuff's just going to get better and better.
Mm-hmm.
I think about does it. Unless you got anything else you want to add about these laptops.
No, I think you've got it all there pretty much. I'm excited to see these chips come to sort of desktop class PCs, all-in-ones, mini PCs. That's sort of where I'm looking next for these. But yeah, I'm excited.
Yep, and we do know they will be coming to like the mini PCs and all-in-ones. I think that was already suggested strongly by the CEO of Qualcomm. So, but yeah, 6 weeks from now, IFA Berlin, September 3rd through the 6th. Of course, Intel will be there too. Intel wants it to be their story. They'll be officially unveiling, Lunar Lake. That's the expectation there, and new laptops with Lunar Lake, which will be really good. We'll have to wait and see how they compare. A lot is riding on Intel there, though, so we'll see what happens. But I don't know. You got a thing of the week that you want to talk about?
I've been watching The Boys season 4.
Oh,
It's been pretty awesome. It's just come to an end now, so if you want to binge the whole season, you can. We've talked about The Boys before. It's a very gruesome show about sort of superheroes, a very adult show, where the superheroes are sort of bad in a lot of ways, and so. Yeah, it's been great so far, and I think season 4 was a good season. I think it wasn't the best season. I think a lot of people were a little bit let down by some of the decisions they made as sort of from a plot point perspective. But I thought it was all right, and I've enjoyed it very much. It's on Amazon Prime.
Nice. Yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes. There was that scene in the convention where they follow the guy into the sauna.
Yeah.
Like I said before, like. I don't get offended when I watch movies, like, and I wasn't offended at this, but I was still like, wow.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's an episode later in the season that's even worse than that. Just so
like,
you know.
I just any show that makes me go like, wow, I can't believe they did that. Like, I want to give. The producers and everybody like a high five because it's just like, wow, you went there. All right. Because I love it. But I was still thinking about that scene later, like, wow, I can't believe I saw that. But yeah, I got to catch up on there. I've been watching a ton of things. I've been going to the movies a lot with my best friend. So we just saw Long Legs, which is that new kind of horror film out there, which was good, weird. If you're into 70s, sort of creepy, kind of more horror type things, I highly recommend it. Nicolas Cage was off the chain as usual, but that was fun. I did see Kinds of Kindness. That was really weird. I didn't like that movie, but I did think about it a lot after I saw it, which tells you something that, it was interesting. And I know there's been a few other movies I saw. Of course, now I'm drawing blanks on them all.
Deadpool is out today, isn't it? I think I've got tickets to go see Deadpool tomorrow, so that should be fun.
Yeah, everybody's gonna go see that. I still want to see Twisters, although no one wants to see it with me. Whatever. I watch trash movies. I watch film. I don't care. I watch anything. Beekeeper is still the best movie ever made. That's what I'm saying. Did you see Beekeeper yet?
No, I have not seen it.
Go watch The Beekeeper.
I know you've told me. You've told me.
It's a movie you watch and you're gonna be like, what? Like, how did they do this? Like, what? Why? Yeah, I should have wrote down all the things I saw. There were other movies I saw too, but I saw Sing Sing. I don't even know if that's out yet. That's a movie that's coming out. That won't go. A lot of people won't even have heard about this film. It's A24, which is such a great studio, but it's about these guys in prison, specifically one guy in prison, and at the Sing Sing prison in New York City, and he joins a theater company, and they use art as a rehabilitation type tool, and he's not guilty of his crime, and he's trying to get out and all this. And it's a really good human story about people whose lives led them to a certain situation, and they use art as a way to try to express themselves and better themselves. But what's really fascinating by it is a lot of the actors in the movie are the real life prisoners of the story that they're telling, acting in this movie.
Wow.
Which is just wild. You're watching and you're like, wait, I've never seen these actors before. And it's because, no, they're prisoners playing themselves, basically.
It's crazy.
In the story of how this happened, how this really happened. And it was really touching. And it was such a wild, film experiment almost. Like I said, most people won't watch it, but if that doesn't get nominated for some kind of Oscar for something, it would be a real shame because it's such a great experiment in filmmaking, I thought. So, but anyway, we'll think of something next next month when we come back. Are we going to try to do more podcasts?
Yeah,
we'll definitely do one post IFA.
I want to try and do one every 2 weeks. I think that's a nice balance. It's just sometimes we've just got meetings and stuff. It's just difficult to get it done. But I'm gonna sort the calendar out, and I promise you we're gonna start doing it once every 2 weeks, because I think that's a nice balance. Because once a week is just like there's sometimes just nothing to talk about, and so once every 2 weeks I think is a good balance. So the next episode will be on August 8th, hopefully.
Let's plan for that. I think IFA will be really interesting. We'll have a lot to talk about then. I know at least one laptop that's coming out that I'm very excited to talk about. That should be really interesting, especially in lieu of the conversation we just had earlier. With that, we'll do some Q&A with the audience for the live portion, but that doesn't get recorded. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Daniel_Rubino, Rubino, also on Threads. I don't post there to both as often as I used to, but I still do post on occasion. But you can always, if you do message me, I will respond. So feel free there. And follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN as well. As always, thanks for listening in, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
Awesome. If you have any questions, we will do Q&A for a couple of minutes, but I do need to run quite soon. So we'll hang around for a short period of time. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. And if there are no questions, we will be heading off.
Someone was asking if I tested the LCD version of Surface Pro 11. I did not. That said, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's the same LCD
as the Pro 9.
As the previous Surface devices, which is a really good display.
Yep.
It's the OLED is better. The OLED will have deeper blacks, have a higher contrast ratio, and it gets brighter with HDR and Dolby Vision. But I think the differences would be very apparent, or at least apparent, if you were to look at them side by side. I think if you just went out and bought a Surface Pro 11 and you got the LCD version and you didn't think about it, you'd be very happy. I'm confident saying that.
We should have talked about you ordering a Galaxy Fold 6.
Yeah.
We can talk about it when you get it, when it arrives, I guess.
Yeah, it hasn't showed up yet. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I got a really good deal on that. I shouldn't have spent the money. And I still might return it. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to keep it. I probably will. I really love the Fold 5. I told this story before. I bought the Fold 4, returned it because I did not like it. Got the Fold 5 from Samsung, and I loved it. Just because I think the criticisms are fair that Samsung is not innovating as fast, and these changes are small. But these small changes, for me, have always made a difference. I find the S24 Ultra, which I use as my main device, way better than the S23 Ultra, even though there's not a ton that's new with it. But the small changes they have done are just been really, really good. And I will say, I think I have a theory, and we'll talk about this when I get it. I think the lack of innovation is partially due to Samsung doubling down on trying to get these devices stable and reliable in terms of the folding display and the ability to reduce failure rates. I don't know what the failure rates are for OnePlus, for Pixel, and for all the other competition that's out there. I just know Samsung makes the most of these, and so my guess is there is a failure rate that's higher than most normal phones. And I think that's a thing that I still see people mention in comments. Even people with the Fold 5 are like, mine, had an issue with the screen, all this. I think Samsung is very concerned with just nailing down the engineering of these devices, like they introduced now with the dust protection, right? And all this kind of stuff. I think they're very concerned with reliability and focusing all their attention on that with small refinements versus the innovation stuff. Because with the innovation stuff, when you change it up dramatically, you open yourself up to other side effects. I think no one proves this point more than Apple. Apple releases the thinnest iPhone ever. What does everybody do? They sit on it and bend it, right? Or they introduce 5G and has antenna lines everywhere that the way they hold it blocks it. They have so many of these issues every time they try to change something or the scissor keys, right? When they did that, we made the world's thinnest keys that take up less space so we can have thinner laptops. And then you get like Cheeto dust and it ruins your keyboard, right? So like Apple is king of changing innovation, but then having these side effects. And I think Samsung is trying to kind of avoid that right now as they really hone in their skills. I could be completely wrong. Maybe OnePlus, maybe Pixel, their failure rates are equal to what Samsung's are, or they're even lower. That could be the case. I'm completely wrong. But I think that's why they're doing this. So that's my theory.
Yeah, I was tempted by the Fold 6, but I'm going to hold out for the Pixel Fold 2, I think, because that's sort of leaked out now, and it looks amazing.
It does, yeah. And what's funny is mine's supposed to ship on the day that they announced the new Pixel Fold. So, like, I would be, like, within my return window, so I'm okay with that. Yeah, someone, Bazime, I don't know. Do you think there's a chance? Samsung refines the device so it's perfect working order. Every device fixes something internally for the previous gen. Yeah, I mean, the fact is, this is what all the reviews say about the Fold 6. Yeah, competition has better stuff, better cameras, it's wider, but Samsung has like the overall best software experience, hardware experience, and customer service. For getting things repaired and everything like that. I think that's important to people. Sometimes the best isn't necessarily the most cutting edge. That said, even the cameras are improved. The tech chap did a good review of it where he compared the photos of the Fold 5 and Fold 6 and showed that the color science and the new ISP stuff matters. Like it does improve a lot on the Fold 6's image, and I think that's important. So yeah, it's cool stuff. But yeah, the Pixel. Yeah, those cameras are going to be good.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Because I've been using the Pixel Fold 1 pretty much since it came out, and I love this. I love this design. Sadly, the Pixel 2 is less sort of squat, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's more taller. But it's still probably about the same width, I would hope, because I think the issue I have with the Fold 6 and the Folds in general, the Samsung Folds more than anything, is just the outside cover screen is too narrow for me. I just don't like it. I know some people do like that, but I don't.
I like it.
Yeah.
I do. I think where they're going to land on with Fold 6 is going to be really ideal, but I like it because of the one-handed usage. Like for me, that's because the Fold 6 is going to be two-handed when it's a tablet, but it's nice to have a one-handed option when it's not. Whereas most phones, like my S24 Ultra, barely. Like I'm taking a risk with that.
Yeah.
I will say, what has really soured me on Pixels is their goddamn processors.
Yeah, they're not great, are they?
They are not. Every time I fire up my Pixel 8, because it does have an amazing camera on it, it is so slow now. And I get such stutters, I get delays. I take a photo and it's like doing work. It's the worst performing smartphone I own currently. Now, granted, I have a Fold 5, which is the Gen 2 8CX, Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. And then I have the S24 Ultra, which is the Gen 3. The performance difference with the Gen 3 is just like, it kills my Pixel. So much so, that's why I switched back to using the S24 Ultra.
Yeah.
I feel like Qualcomm's chips are just on a different level compared to where Google is. Maybe that'll change, with I'm open to the new Pixel Fold. But the Pixel 8 drives me nuts in using it now in terms of how slow it's gotten. And it's like, it's really infuriating. I feel like I'm using a device from like 5 years ago.
Yeah, the G chips, the Tensor chips are based on Samsung design, which the Exynos design.
Samsung doesn't even use.
Yeah, right. So apparently the G4, which is coming in these new phones, is also on that sort of similar Exynos design. It's the G5, which is supposed to be on the newer, better design that is supposed to match Qualcomm, and so not this year, unfortunately. So the G4 will be a bit better than the G3 and the G2, but it won't be leaps and bounds better. My biggest issue with Tensor is that it just gets really warm All the Pixels I've ever
Yes.
used that use Tensor just get warm. They're just warm. They're
And
just warm
battery
all the
life.
time. Yeah, the battery life
life
great.
on the Pixel 8 is like, again, like I was always surprised with the Fold 5. That was the other thing. The battery life on the Fold 5, I never went to bed without that thing dying.
Yeah.
And the S24 Ultra has been incredible. I go to bed every night with that at least 60% battery life.
Yeah, that's great.
And the Pixel 8, like, no. The Pixel 8 will get me down to 20% easily by the end of the day.
My Pixel 4 was about that, yeah. All right, there's a question in the chat here. So, are these first batch of Copilot PCs all we have for 2024? No, I think we're expecting probably some more towards the end of the summer, early fall, from all the big main OEMs. There'll be laptops, and hopefully we'll also see some other form factors as well, like desktops and whatnot.
Yeah.
Anatomy, knowledge. Oh no, there's one question here. AI is using an insane amount of power. Microsoft noticed. Why don't they inform their users of the harm that using these services does? I don't know. I mean, yeah, you're right. There's no warning in any of the sort of chat interfaces that I've seen that says this will use a lot of power. But I guess, why would you sell that to the end user? They want people to use this stuff. So they're not going to tell you that it's slowly killing the world. Not only that, I think Microsoft technically still reckons it can be carbon neutral by 2030, even with this uptick in AI usage on its servers and whatnot. So I don't know. There must be some give and some take there in regards to Microsoft and how they view this. But yeah, you're right. I mean, people need to do the research at the very least then to because these companies aren't going to tell you. I mean, to be fair, it would be like asking a chocolate bar manufacturer to say this will make you unhealthy. Like, they're not going to say that, are they?
I think there's also they do talk about it. It is talked about in the industry, but the whole point of having an NPU and pushing NPUs is to get away from that and move towards a hybrid approach where you start to do a lot of this stuff locally on your machine using more efficient hardware. That said, the training and all that kind of stuff does still require a lot of power. I mean, that's kind of the joke, though, is that they're going to use all this AI to solve the AI power problem, right? You just ask AI, hey, how do you make yourself more power efficient?
Yeah.
And maybe it comes up with the answers. I don't know.
Stop using me.
But, yeah.
All right, with that, I think that's probably about it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Like I said, we'll be trying to do this every 2 weeks, so the next one should be on August 8th. But yes, until then, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.